Hi, my name is Benet Davetian. I'm presently Associate Professor and Chair of the Sociology and Anthropology Department, University of Prince Edward Island. Actually, I stopped being Chair at midnight on Monday. Freedom at last. I'm sorry that I'm speaking to you through YouTube, but I've had minor surgery after recording this video and really couldn't make it to my beloved city, Montreal. So I'll try to do my best in the 10 minutes that are allotted to us on YouTube. A woman wearing curlers goes out in the streets in France. She's American. Everybody looks at her like she's crazy. Another American goes in a store in France, does not say bonjour, and wonders why she's not getting served. A Chinese student attends a Canadian class and cannot understand why the professor doesn't compliment her for working so hard. Two tourists go to Eastern Europe. They make a sarcastic joke thinking they're funny, and the clerk starts laughing hysterically. Encouraged, they continue until the clerk, eyes blazing with anger, grabs a stick and chases them out. Why do these things happen? Well, as sociologists and anthropologists, we have grossly neglected studying the cultural codex of each nation and the manner in which people communicate. It's not just a matter of norms and values. It's a matter of understanding what the symbolic meaning of something is, although the manner in which it's being expressed is different. And today, in this brief time, I would like to talk about two elements that may help us in avoiding these kinds of embarrassing and sometimes conflict engendering situations. This whole 10 minutes business on YouTube allows me to begin speaking about something that is quite important in civil interaction. Edward Hall and Mildred Hall, a few years ago, about 30 years ago, described that different cultures have different relationships to time, context, and space. I found this concept very interesting because in my studies of civility, I have noticed that as you go from one culture to another, what can be considered appropriate and admirable in one culture is completely disgusting in another. And I have realized that many of these differences have to do with the way people relate to time, context, and space. Even the manner in which they express politeness and the manner in which conflict occurs, escalating irritation, escalating violence, depends very much on how people relate to the contextualization of situations, and particularly to time and space. Let me give you a few examples of what I'm speaking of. Anglo-American cultures, including Germanic cultures, as described by Edward and Mildred Hall, tend to be low context. This means time is very precious, time is important, communication is simple and direct, and there is a minimum amount of information given. Things are hurried. Notice this conference. We each have 10, 15 minutes. In France, it'd be more like 30 minutes or maybe an hour, depending on the number of people attending. So, in this climate, people are continuously pressured to get the job done, to get the communication over with, before getting into an impasse, getting into a communicative paralysis, if you want. And we are not very good at multitasking in low context cultures. Although we like to think that we are a multitasking generation, a lot of stress has come out of this. High context cultures, on the other hand, are able to do many things at once. They prefer taking their time. They don't spend time, they don't save time, they don't measure time, they take the time. And they prefer going in depth into a situation, be it a relationship or a job. So it is very common for high context cultures to delay giving decisions that are required by low context cultures. As you noticed when the United States was going to war with Iraq, France took a long time to decide, and this was misinterpreted as lack of cooperation. This kind of relationship to meaning, to language, affects very much the civil interaction ethos of a culture. For example, in high context cultures, there are a tremendous amount of metaphors and hidden meanings, and the individual is expected to have the cultural information necessary to communicate in this quasi-code. The same statement that would be taken at face value in an Anglo-American culture. For example, if I say to you, "Oh, you can count on me, I'll be there." In a high context culture, that may be code for, "I don't think I'm going to bother being there." And here we come to the politeness systems of these two different systems that have different relationships to time, context, and space. In low context cultures, we practice what is called positive politeness. Penelope Brown and Levinson developed this, and it's quite brilliant. In positive politeness, we express politeness by directly becoming involved with the life of the other and showing interest for the likes of the other, agreeing with the other, and being quite intimate right from the get-go. That's why we say hello to each other in the streets in small towns, such as where I live. In negative politeness cultures, politeness is expressed by respecting the space of the other. It is a politeness of non-imposition. You do not get into private matters right at the beginning of a conversation. You do not ask what the other person does for a living. You take your time. And taking your time, the relationship becomes more difficult to launch, but in the long run, perhaps more resilient and more long-lasting. What does this mean for our study of civility? Well, it means a lot. One, in cross-cultural context, it's good to know that what we think is going to work may not work because of the cultural habituations of the other. Pierre Bourdieu has spoken greatly about how habituation and habitus have a great effect on culture. While some things are universal, other things are expressed locally. But what I want to focus on, just to finish up this very short time allowed me, is the idea of cultural cohesion. Through my studies of media and through my studies of interaction, and especially the educational system at the university level, I have noticed that we are becoming even more low context than before. While we speak of being a culture of high information, the information is high because of its quantity, but not necessarily its depth. Students take many courses. They're supposed to do many readings. But is the depth being maintained or increased? I do not think so. I think we've become an expedient culture. We have a background of low context, sort of turn on a dime, let's get it done and over with, and let's be first out of the gate mentality. And as we approach this networked, very complicated world, we are not taking the time to see that sometimes the rushing about may precisely be our undoing. Some cultures, of course, have both characteristics. You could call them medium context cultures. But I have noticed, and this is a small part of my 600-page study of civility and cultural history, I think it's in chapter 9 and 10, how you can tie different ways of expressing embarrassment, shame, central pillars of socialization and civility interaction, and what is known of time, context, space, and politeness theory to really understand how a culture develops, how it develops its preferences, and how it will change because of these foundational pillars. So I thank you very much for listening to me. A more comprehensive paper will be posted on my site at the Civility Institute. It'll be the complete paper. And I very much appreciate you agreeing to watch this simulation, as Baudrillard would affectionately call it. I thank you. Have a good conference.